this. The signal from the environment activated the receptor, which activated the effector, and the effector activated the secondary signal to go down to the protein. Remember that picture just a minute ago? Well, here's the point. In this illustration, the protein's not there. And if I need the protein because the environmental signal, I have to respond to the signal, and the protein's not there, what would I need to do if the protein's not present in the cell? Go to the nucleus and activate the gene for the making of the protein, right? So let's watch the behavior of this as it happens. So basically what's going to happen is this. The environmental signal joins to the receptor, activates this whole process so that I activate this, but look, the signal goes down, the proteins are missing. If the proteins are missing, I need the proteins to make the proper response, but they're not there. So what I have to do then is take this signal and go into the nucleus of the cell where the DNA is. But the DNA is covered up by a sleeve of protein. And at periodic points, at every gene, there's a control protein called a regulatory protein. And you know what happens? The signal from the environment binds to the right gene by the shape. It doesn't bind to this one, wrong shape. Binds to this one. Now what happens when a signal binds to a protein? Changes the shape of the protein. And watch what happens. As soon as I change the shape of the protein, I cause the sleeve to come off the DNA. And when it happens, look what I'm exposing. The gene is now exposed. And what am I going to do with this? Well, I need to make a copy of the gene called RNA, which then goes into the cell where it's turned into the protein. So the bottom line is, then I take the RNA molecule, make a copy of this DNA molecule, and then this is a blueprint of the gene. And this is called RNA, messenger RNA, and this blueprint is actually used to make the protein. So what's the understanding about this whole process? It says this, the gene is not exposed until the signal calls it into play. When the signal is gone, the sleeve covers it up and the gene is now hidden. If this is a cancer gene, and it's not giving you cancer because it's not exposed, what will cause the cancer gene to express itself? The signal. So all of a sudden it says, then what signals from your environment are you perceiving that you are selecting negative genes or processes in your body? And all of a sudden we start to see, so let's do the same thing now without all the labels, real fast. The secondary signal goes down, the protein's missing. The secondary signal goes into the nucleus, finds the right gene by binding to the right regulatory protein, causing the regulatory protein sleeve to come off, exposing the gene. And once the gene's exposed, I make a copy of it called RNA, and this is what goes out into the cell and is used for the function and behavior of the cell. So what is the conclusion of all of this? And the answer is simply this. Perception controls genes. Understand? The genes did not control themselves. The perception was the signal that converted the sleeve of the DNA to come off. So the bottom line is, perception not only controls behavior, but perception will actually go in and select which genes you're going to express. Now here comes the third part. The first part, perception controlled behavior because the protein was there. The second part, the signal shows up and the protein's not there, so the perception signal goes to the genes and activates the appropriate gene. Here's the third part. What happens if I run into a stressful environment and I don't have the appropriate genes to respond to that stress? Well, then you just have to say, well, the only way you're going to manage is to change the genes. Well, in conventional biology, the only way the genes change is a process called random mutation. This is in all the textbooks. What does it mean? It says this. I can chemically cause a mutation to occur, but what I can't control is the outcome. The outcome is always random. So the bottom line is that's where Darwinian belief comes in, that evolution was random changes in the genes, that genes are only changing by accident. That's conventional belief. Except 1988, this paper comes out in Nature by a man called John Cairns, and it changes the entire foundation of biology that we've ever held for the following reason. He tells us about a new kind of mutation called an adaptive mutation. The point about this mutation? That the genes are not changing randomly, but the environment is controlling the mutation. So that you're always adjusting your genes to fit what you see in the environment. And so that it's not random, it's environmentally directed mutations. Well, recently, this is a paper that just came out within the last year. The other one was 1988. This is a very interesting paper because what they showed was this. You can take a population of bacteria, put it into 5 test tubes, and put the same but very stressful environment into each of the test tubes, causing the bacteria to change their genes to survive. Here's the point. In each of the 5 test tubes, the result was exactly the same. Well, then all of a sudden it says, where's the random nature of that process? And the answer is not random. Evolutionary changes are always adapting to the environment. These miniature adaptive radiations unfold in the same way every time, governed by the available environmental niches. Here's the point. We adjust our genes to fit the environment that we think we live in. And I say we think we live in because perception may be right and perception may be wrong. And therefore, perception is belief. And if this is true, do you understand what this means? It's belief that changes your genes. It's your perception that changes your genes. It's not an accident. And so this chart out of Science, which is about Cairns' work about genetic changing, I marked this one with an asterisk because when this article came out, this box was called Genes of DNA Metabolism. There's now a new name for that. They're called genetic engineering genes. What this means is this. We have now found out that in every one of your cells, you have genes whose function it is to rewrite the other genes when necessary. So you are all equipped with an ability to adapt and change your genes as you respond to the environment. So all of a sudden it says this. The environment, watch where the arrow goes, the environmental signals activate genetic engineering genes. They can change your own genes and change your genotype. But this one, organisms' perception of the environment separate from the environment. Why? Because perception and environment may be 2 different things. I might say, I live in a toxic, hostile environment. But that might be my belief. I might be in a very supportive environment. So it says, my perception may differ from the reality of the environment. But nonetheless, what does perception do? Follow the blue arrow. Activates genetic engineering genes. Your own beliefs are selecting your genes. And if you don't have the right genes to handle the stress that you're in, your belief will rewrite your genes in an effort to do so. So all of a sudden it says there's a lot of control over your life, but it's mediated by the perception of the environment. That's what's controlling the whole thing. So our third conclusion is not only does the perception activate behavior, not only does the perception activate the genes, but when necessary, perception rewrites genes. So what's the conclusion? Are you genetically controlled? Are you at the behest of your heredity? Are you a victim? Absolutely not. Why? Because by adjusting your perception, you can adjust your behavior. By adjusting your perception, you can select different genes in your function. By adjusting your perception, you can rewrite your genes. Now, I wouldn't want you to rewrite your genes because 95% of us got here with very appropriate genes to survive and have a great life. Here's the problem. Almost always when you rewrite your genes, you do a negative process because your genes were already working. And so lots of illnesses and things like cancer, 95% of cancer has no hereditary linkage. 95% of cancer is actively produced by an individual's perception rewriting their normal genes and making cancer genes. And all of a sudden, unfortunately, remember when I told you when you were a victim of your heredity, you could be irresponsible because the genes just came that way. If you understand what I'm talking about, then all of a sudden you say, oh my goodness, then how I see things, how I believe things are going on become important. The answer is, well, if you think your behavior or the selection of your genes or the rewriting of your genes is important, then the answer is yes, because all of these are connected to belief, because perception in humans is related to belief. So you have the ability to change anything in your body. Unfortunately, if you got here healthy and you change it, that usually means you're making it less effective as a living organism. So the bottom line is this. The perception of the environment, your nervous system sees the environment and